Hi guys. So the story that I chose, the graphic novel that I chose was Banned Book Club by Hyun Sook and Ryan Estrada. And mine is actually on my Kindle. I don't have like a physical copy of it. So I apologize. The words are obviously going to be in reverse or like mirrored. But yeah, this is what it looks like. Now, as for the creative team, I couldn't really find anything about like the inker, the pencil, or all that stuff. So I got what I could. Obviously, the writers, like I said, are Kim Hyun Suk and Ryan Estrada. The artist is Ko Hyung Ju. The publisher and editor were C. Spike Trotman. The assistant editor is Andrea Purcell. The book designer is Matt Sheridan. The proofreader was Abby Laird. And the print technician was Beth Sforzato. As for the publisher, it was Iron Circle Comics. And the length of this story is about 100, not about, it is 199 pages. That's 199. And it is a genuine graphic novel. It's not a compilation, it's one story from beginning to end. As for the acts, Act 1 was pages 1 through 50. Act 2 was pages 51 to 157. And Act 3 was pages 158 to 199. Now, this doesn't exactly fit our model, but it is very close to the quarter, half, quarter method that we used. I believe to be exact, it would have been like 1 to 49 and then like 51 to like 149. So like I said, it was pretty close because 149 is close to 157 by like 9 pages. So as for whose story it is, now the protagonist is actually Hyun Suk, which is it's basically like an autobiography, and I'll get to that later. It is the story of Hyun Suk. Her goal is to do well in college and study hard, but that does change to reflect those of her friends to fight against oppression. And that is the ultimate goal of this novel, to fight against oppression and violence that take place in South Korea during this time. And the conflict in Act Two does support this because Act Two is all about this fight and the protests and all of that against the oppression in South Korea. The story does have a solid story arc. The beginning is about Hyun Suk convincing her parents to let her go to college. Then, once she's at college, she's trying to focus on her studies. In the middle, Hyun Suk gets involved in the band book club, which helps to begin understanding what the protests are all about. And she begins to protest in her own ways, partially by reading all the banned books she can find. But she even gets interrogated by an officer at one point. And then in the end, Hyun Suk and her friends from the band book club work to free Jihu, who was one of their friends, who was interrogated for something he didn't do. Basically, there was a picture of someone that only slightly resembled him. It was basically a guy with glasses, which is what he wears. And in that picture, he was assaulting an officer. That person was not him, so he was interrogated and had a lot of violent actions against him for something that he didn't do. And then in 2016, which is at the end of the story, the friends meet again and everyone explains what they've been up to since school. As for the resolution, it's very bittersweet because we see everyone is happy and thriving, but there is still a lot of work to be done. The protests aren't over, and the innocent are still not given the rights they deserve, and people are still punished with no freedom of speech to fall back on. Let's see. Hyun Suk has a solid character arc. Um, she changes drastically. She goes from avoiding any protests and keeping her head down to joining in the protest herself and continuing the fight into 2016, which is where the end of the novel takes place. The transitions are effective because they are not the non sequitur type. Like McLeod was explaining, the non sequitur type is the one where the two pictures between, or like there's two panels and they don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. In this case, the transitions are action to action, which allows it to read more like a story, I think. And if there is a huge time or setting jump, there is an effective caption to explain it. And I actually have an example of that. Let me pull it up. On page 187, which is the beginning of chapter 10. Second. harder on a Kindle versus having the hard copy, but I'm gonna make do. Beginning of chapter 10, you can kind of see it. It says 2016, like right here. And that was a huge time jump because it went from 1983 to 2016. So the author expresses that by showing the caption. Let's see. The most common transition in this work, as I said, was the action to action transition. And as I was trying to explain but didn't quite hit on, what this means is that a single subject is discussed across the gutters with different actions portrayed in each. And I have another example of that here on page 82. You can see here kind of that it shows them on the bus heading to the park and then them walking in the park right here. And then it goes down to the girls talking. And then Hyun, who is the guy in the group, the head guy in the group, he reaches for Hyun Sook's hand and they're holding hands. And then it goes to the ducks at the park. So the subject remains the same on this page and in these transitions of them being in the park. Let's see here. The story does make use of a page as a mini comic idea, and it does work effectively. Almost every page could stand out on its own as a mini comic and still make sense. I do have another example on page 79. You can't really read it, so I'm going to read it to you, but basically it's saying, I made rose wine, it's really good. Help us drink Uni's rose wine, it's not very good. Hyun says, I can't leave, I've got to work. Hyun says, that's right, what if we get a customer? Or sorry, Hyun's mom says that. What if we get a customer? And then they all basically say, what if we buy 6 of your finest steaks? And then they basically, this page is all about them going to get wine and eating steak together at the park, what they're going to go to in the next couple pages. So that one page could basically read as a mini comic. So I do think that they use the page as a mini comic concept. As for directional flow, the movement of the art does combine with layout and text on the page to pull the reader through. I do see the Z pattern used throughout. And as an example, I think this is one of the last examples I have. I'm sorry, it's so hard to read it on this screen. But as you can see, it goes, the bubbles, let me see if I can get this in here. It goes from here to here to here to here to here. So it does have the pretty good Z pattern going. And that's the same for almost every page. You see that Z pattern, so the directional flow is there. As for if I recommend this to my classmates, I do highly recommend this graphic novel. It's a great example of everything we discussed this month, from the active structure almost matching our method perfectly to that Z pattern that I just mentioned. As for recommending it to my friends, probably not, only because I don't think they would understand why it's such a great story. None of my friends truly grasp comic books or graphic novels and don't really have much of a passion for politics either. My only other observation would be that the lettering in this graphic novel is awesome. The balloons are perfectly set on the pages without interfering with the art, and there are just enough words per page to read smoothly without becoming overwhelming. So like some of the comics that we read this month. And the sound effects work well. They blend into the background perfectly. Now, my fun fact, as sad as it may be, this is actually based on a true story. Hyun Sook is based on the author, Kim Hyun Sook, go figure. And this is all lightly based on what really happened to her. The story is based around the censorship and violence that really took place in South Korea while she was in college in 1983. And censorship and violence are still commonplace today there. Pretty sad, but true. So that was all I had, though. Like I said, I greatly recommend this book. I think it was a great graphic novel, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your month.